Right, welcome to i3 TV. Me and Jamie here today. I'm outside the O2 store.
Right, and what we're doing today is we're doing the big battle. It's the big playoff. It's the iPhone 4S versus the Samsung Galaxy S2. Who's going to be on top? We'll find out. We're going to go see somebody right now.
Right, and welcome to i3 TV. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jamie.
And I'm Jazz.
And today we're here to talk about the battle between the iPhone 4S and the Samsung Galaxy S2. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask Jazz a few questions, get the feel for the ground. I've got a feeling Jazz is a bit of an iPhone 4S man, so I think it's going to be a tough one. Me and Joe are strongly in the Galaxy S2 camp. So what we want to do is we're going to start off with the weight and height of the phone itself. Now obviously we both know that the S2 wins in terms of the actual weight of the phone. It's slimmer, and obviously when you're sort of rummaging around in your pockets, the last thing you want is a big bulky phone. And unfortunately that's where the Samsung, Joe will agree with me on this, is where the Samsung beats the iPhone 4S. What do you reckon?
You're right, the Samsung is slim. It's got a big screen on it as well and everything as well. And when you rummage around in your pocket, you don't want a big bulky phone. What we noticed, well, the amount of customers that have coming through the doors, is that they don't want a handset with a nice feel on it. So where the iPhone's got a nice metallic feel on it, it's actually smaller in height, a little bit thicker. But it just means when you do rummage around your pocket, you know it's there. So on a drunken night out, you're not gonna know that it's lost.
But at the same time though, Jazz, you don't want it pulling down your huggies with all that weight. And seriously, if I'm wearing loose pants, which I am right now...
In these days, yeah, who wears belts?
Who wears belts, exactly. You see all those skateboarding kids down the park nowadays with the trousers around their asses. This is going to be the big problem with the iPhone 4S. Where's the divide?
Well, you got two options. Obviously, you can have it hanging around your neck, but ultimately, with a phone like this, you're going to want to show it off. So if you have it in your pocket, you have it in your pocket. But get a case for it. You can get cases that strap onto your arm, so you look like a real cool dude when you're at the skate park with your trousers hanging down halfway through your ass. But ultimately, you want to show the phone off. You might have a Samsung Galaxy S2, but it's going to be exactly the same thing. So if you are skating or you're playing football, running around that light phone that you just described then, it's going to fall out your pocket and potentially smash on the floor because it's so light and a little bit clumsy.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's got a more expensive feel. It looks a bit sleeker than the Samsung S2. I've got to admit, even though I'm a Samsung man, I do like the expensive feel of the iPhone 4S. So I can agree with you on that, but I just think in terms of weight, if I'm rummaging around in my pocket and I've got my wallet in there, the last thing I want is a bulky phone. Otherwise it would look a bit inappropriate if it's in your front pocket, if you see what I mean, ladies. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about or touch on is the display. Now obviously, Jazz is going to hit me with a blah blah Retina display malarkey, right? Now there's one thing I hate, and that's the Retina display disciples, because essentially for me on a smartphone, bigger is better. Now bigger is better is for gaming, pictures, anything you can do on that display, I believe enhances that overall experience of the phone. Jazz, how are you going to defend this one, mate?
We've seen Samsung's advertisement about bigger, brighter, faster. It certainly is bigger, as we've discussed. It's a bit sort of a little bit slimmer. Brighter, yeah. Well, then again, I could just turn the brightness up on my phone if I wanted it that bright. Ultimately, the brightness is only ever going to kill my battery life. So if you have to compare the two battery lives together, you know, it's the iPhone. It doesn't go as bright, but if you want it that bright, then really you should get a torch. As far as I'm concerned, with it being faster, they've got exactly the same processor. Yeah, you're right. Samsung did make the Apple processor, but it's the Apple software inside that makes the difference between the two. Over to you.
Okay, but that doesn't necessarily explain the experience. Now, would you agree that the Samsung has better browsing experience and better gaming experience than the iPhone 4S because of its bigger screen? For example, at home, bigger is better on the TV, is it not? You'd rather have a 50-inch than a 32-inch. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you'd rather have a 12-inch than a 3-inch as well. Yeah, no, I completely understand.
Exactly. So the same goes with the phone. Would you agree that the Samsung has a slight edge on display? I mean, if you're honest.
If I'm honest, on display, yeah, it is that little bit brighter, and the gaming experience is that little bit better. But this is the whole argument around it. iPhone's more for business, for those people that walk around a little bit with their nose in the air with a nice pinstripe jacket instead of a nice tweed jacket and some jeans on. It's for the people that don't need that gaming experience, that don't need to have their PlayStation or Xbox following them around in their pocket all day left, right and centre. But On the flip side, yeah, it is that little bit brighter.
Okay, so you mentioned the chips a second ago.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, an interesting point for me is that Samsung actually make Apple's engine, so to speak. They're both exactly the same engines behind it. So, where's the difference? I mean, essentially, if we touch on price, now, iPhone 4S 16 gig, £499. The Samsung Galaxy S2, £410. I make that £89 difference there. Where's the £89 if it's the same sort of process, same sort of engine running?
£89 going to a couple of things. First of all, flawless software, if you've not already heard about, or if you're not the famous Apple flawless software. And also with Samsung, if your phone ever goes faulty, which it's more likely to go faulty if you get the Samsung, you send it away to Samsung to be repaired. They're only going to repair it, and it gets repaired, it gets repaired. With one of these bad boys, you send it straight to Apple, they'll replace it with you within 15 minutes. 15 minutes is the same amount of time it takes for you to look into your phone to dial Apple's number. So you take it straight to the store, or send it away with us, and it'll get replaced straight away, no messing around. That £89 doesn't just justify the fact that the phone gets replaced. It's all it is pretty much the flawless software. The fact that you don't get crashing, you don't have to have an update on the software every so often, and also the software goes up in numbers rather than someone on Munchies really, because the latest one's called Ice Cream.
Okay.
Before that gingerbread, so on and so forth. That extra £89 necessarily is for the flawless software, the fact that it's Apple, and the fact that your handset will get replaced rather than repaired.
Okay, I'll touch on the fact that it's because it's Apple in a second, because that's one of my biggest bugbears. But before I move on to that, let's just talk about connectivity. This is a big one close to my heart. I think everybody needs to know that they've got a fast connection, that essentially it's seamless to connect, and it's easy to browse, and the general performance of the phone is flawless. I don't want to be waiting for hours for things to render. Now, in terms of connectivity, isn't it also right that the Samsung S2 has much more connectivity than the Apple iPhone 4S? And I say that because there's Wi-Fi, near-field communication on the Samsung 2, which is now built into most of the Samsung phones. You've got the 4G, BT3 3.0, DLNA, and free Wi-Fi tethering as well. So you've got a real arsenal of connectivity on the S2. Opposed to the 4S, which is 3G, GPS, BT, 4.0, 4G, and Wi-Fi. There's much more of a difference there, and I think the key there lies in the near-field communication, which is the NFC technology, and it's fast, seriously fast. What can you say about connectivity on the iPhone 4S? How are you gonna stop us from this?
Both the handsets run on 4G, as you quite rightly stipulated, which is anything up to about 128 megabytes per second, but it's no use to anybody if you can't get connection. So if you're out in the middle of a field, or whether you're inside a centre, it depends on what network you want, depends on what connection you can get. It can also depend on a browser as well, so the Apple's got Safari, and where Android's got its own Google server. It's all about where you are, how strong your signal strength really is. I mean, like with the two, it's hard to compare because you have to be both in the same place using the same connectivity. Ultimately, whether you're using Safari or the Google Android's browser, you're going to be able to do the same thing. If there's any speed difference whatsoever, it'll be a split of a second. That's really about it. I mean, like...
Okay, so hold on. One of the key things, I guess, with the iPhone 4S was the new AirPlay.
Yeah.
AirPlay, terrific idea, and I'm not flooring that. And that's something that you obviously can't do with the Samsung phone, which is obviously anything you do on the phone is immediately repeated on your Mac or whatever you've got at home, which is great. However, AirPlay's fun is very limited because most of the AirPlay fun can only be done through an Apple TV, which makes it extremely limited on its technology. And you mentioned Google, etc. What search engine do you use?
Yahoo.
Okay, well, a majority use Google. I think he's pulling my leg there. But in terms of AirPlay and the cloud technology and things like that, don't you think the iPhone and Apple as general are only just catching up with the likes of Android, who've been doing this since inception? I mean, Gmail has been there. I mean, if you ever had an Android phone before, all of your things synced, your contacts, everything synced with your smartphone within seconds. And now it seems like the iPhone 4S is just latching on to that Google, that Android pioneered technology. Where do you feel they are in terms of that difference? I mean, with the flaws with AirPlay just being limited to Apple TV, do you think it's valid to say that Android again have that slight edge?
mean, there's two things to it. You've got the company that got there first, and you've got the company that does it the best. You have got Samsung and the way they do things, but with Apple TV, yeah, you're right, you are limited to Apple products and displaying on Apple products, but it's a case of doing it well. So iCloud, where you've got Google Mail. Google Mail can do your contacts, it can do your calendar entries and whatnot as well, but it doesn't do photos, it doesn't do your videos, it doesn't do the private notes that you've put in, or your browsing history, or your bookmarks, it doesn't. And also with Google Mail, when you get a smartphone, so for example if you get an iPhone or a Samsung or a BlackBerry, you have to have a bolt-on. This is what we have there in Node 2. You have to have a bolt-on for that particular handset to connect to the internet, and then you've got to set up the email. Or you can just go into iCloud.com/Apple and go straight on there and view it on your computer. You can do it straight through your Mac, straight through the Wi-Fi, so you haven't necessarily got to have a bolt-on. Granted, if you're in the middle of the field and you've got connection, fantastic, you can get all your stuff across. But unlike Gmail, you don't have to set up an email address. It's just a case of putting your username and a password in, and it all comes across. But where on Gmail, you can just have, again, just contacts, calendar entries, and a few personal notes. With the iPhone, you get everything. So if you are going to send your phone away to be repaired to get replaced, you can back it all up before you send it away, or take it straight to Apple, back it up, and when they replace it, restore it back again without having to set up a Gmail account.
Okay, so we've basically touched on lots of different things, and one of the core things that's the heart of every smartphone, as Steve Jobs famously said, rest in peace, is that the heart of the smartphone is the operating system. And I think Apple rely a lot on their operating system. As in my opinion, I still think the Samsung trumps the iPhone in things like display and bits and pieces like that. And I think when we still look at Apple, I think they're a massive commercial entity, and it's just something you can't use everyday software on. You have to buy the Apple products, and that's where Apple are really tightening down on the market. And that's one of my biggest bugbears is, to enjoy AirPlay, I have to have Apple TV. I have to make that £100 spend on Apple TV. Whereas Samsung, everything is just sort of fluid. I can buy a third-party Bluetooth system and it works. I don't have to get Apple accessories. And I guess that's the key thing for me, is the commercial aspect and the actual limitations that Apple put on all of their sort of products. So on the software, we've got Joe, and Joe loves software because he's a bit of a gamer. He's a bit of a gamer, he enjoys all the software bits and pieces like that. So I'm going to let Joe have a few different comparisons between the two smartphones, and I think we'll find again that the S2 trumps the iPhone 4. It might not. Jazz has the answers. So I'll pass it over to Joe.
Didn't you notice stuff? So I Jazz about this. Recently we've seen with the iOS 5 update. Don't get me wrong, it's a triumph for Apple. It is a really good update to have on the phone, sort of thing. Obviously, looking nowadays, we look at it, people are either with iPhone, an Android, or a BlackBerry. And now, as of recent things, either with BlackBerry Messenger going down and BlackBerry as such, I think BlackBerry have got themselves out of the market and they've pulled themselves away. And now we're looking at the Androids and the iPhones. So when I was first looking at the iOS 5 update for the iPhone, they showcased us for 10 things, out of 200 apps that are being updated, and they showcased 10 things that the Android phone was already boasting. And one of these things, the first thing was the group notification, so obviously iMessenger. And something BlackBerry is obviously before the BlackBerry Messenger, but the Android is an actual, obviously it's a third-party download you can get for free. So my question to you is, with these 10 apps that they've updated, obviously on top of the other 200, that the Android has come back and turned and saying, no, we've already got this. Do you think the iPhone is taking a step forward, or is it a step behind the Android phones?
Much like I said to your previous question, it's the person who gets there first, but it's also a question of the person who makes it the best. I mean, if you look at the way the Android icons are laid out, again, it's copied the iPhone. If you look at the way where it's got to be swiped to unlock, where you've got to put a pattern in to unlock, it's copied the iPhone. Ultimately, back in 2007, when the 2G iPhone came out, you notice in the likes of Samsung, Sony Ericsson, with the Android software, they kind of copied the way Apple looked. So in that sense, your argument could be, did Apple get there first and then Google tried to copy them? But I do understand that Samsung have got there first, and Apple have just got it in 2011 when Android released again, late last year, early last year. With the recent updates and whatnot, things have become a bit easier, and it is some of the things on there that you expect the phone to have as standard rather than waiting a certain 6 months period for the new software to come out. I mean, a couple of things like when you've got the drop-down menu from the top, that's something that's Android had for a while, but again, Apple have now perfected it. So we've got the weather in there, you've got notifications in there. By all means, you can you can alter Samsung's drop-down menu to have similar things, but you notice BlackBerry also have Messenger, which is BlackBerry Messenger. That's now been incorporated onto so many different applications. You've got WhatsApp Messenger, you've got iMessenger, Google have got their own Google Talk, Google Plus is the same thing. You can do the same thing through Facebook. iPhone have just introduced that new feature into their phone. It's more of a need and desire. You can continue to better the market and come out with new technology all the time. But like I said, it comes down to that question of who gets there first. But ultimately, the best one is who does it the best, really. And in my option, Apple does that the best.
Okay, that's fair enough answer. I mean, obviously I did say a little bit we like, because the Game Center, which you get in the iPhone, is something that the Android doesn't offer, which is fair enough, I think, though. But the Game Center itself with the iPhone, I've looked at and I've seen a lot of detail into it, and I think the Game Center on the iPhone doesn't really offer that much, does it? What's it do? It stores data for a lot of your games that you get for it. At the end of the day, you don't want that, you don't need it, sort of thing. So, which basically, I'm just wondering though, alright, okay, I understand, like you say, that they've perfected the software sort of thing, but if the Android phones have got there first though, why has it took Apple so long though, just to bring their stuff out?
But it comes up to that question where it's about perfection, not just about getting there first. If I'm honest, obviously I can't speak for Apple on their behalf and whatnot, but as we all know, Apple are a very successful company. In fact, they've actually got more disposable profit and revenue than the American government, which is quite a big achievement in itself. I mean, like, they must be doing something right to be selling these kind of products, and again, we are limited on Apple products only, but maybe that's the way things are going. I mean, like, there's always that argument of, oh, because it's Apple, it's got the Apple logo on it, that means it's flawless. I mean, it's got its own reputation from somewhere. It's not a case of copying others or being initiative, it could be one of the two. But I'm going to put it down to the fact that it's Apple. With a Game Center, yeah, you don't get too much. It's a bit like a PlayStation Network or an Xbox Online ID. You can register your scores and so on and so forth, and it will go towards other games. Eventually, you can, again, I'm not Apple, you can imagine things to go a little bit further. So in the Game Center, you might get top prize in the UK or America or around the world. Maybe it's a prize, maybe it's recognition for it. I'm not entirely sure, but because the game's a third party and their scores get registered on the Game Center, effectively it could be nothing to do with Apple at all. But just watch this space. That's the kind of thing around it.
Okay, so Jazz, the big question is iPhone or Samsung S2?
iPhone all the way.
Okay, so there you have it. Jazz is an iPhone man. We're still undecided, but we'll put a verdict up pretty shortly. Jazz, it's been great seeing you and meeting you in your store today.
Just one more thing for the camera as well. Something I'm going to leave you with. How many calories are in a Big Mac? $520 in comparison to your daily amount, saturated fat, fibres, protein. And just in case, if I do want to find my local McDonald's, I can just tap this one guy. His name is Siri. Thank you very much for watching.
Jazz, Jazz, Jazz. If I wanted that sort of information, I'd Google it. Thanks very much. You've been watching i3TV. Thanks very much.
So here we are at the local, the Ostrich Inn, as it is, after a hard-earned interview. So basically, it's a bit of a recap to what we think for the iPhone 4S against the Galaxy S2.
Basically, what our good friend Jazz at the O2 store was actually saying is that basically whoever gets there first, it's not all about that. It's all about
Perfection, as he called it.
perfection.
But at the end of the day, you get there first, you sell. And I think as the Androids are getting there first, they're going to sell, and they're going to soon outsell the iPhones.
So the thing is, what we all need to remember is that Android are part of a massive corporation that turn over more than Apple. So it's not just about the money, but it is also about how they can develop their technology. And Google own that technology share.
Yeah, which is fair enough at the end of the day, but he's gone out as perfection and he thinks that the iPhone's perfected it, but I don't think you can turn and say that the Android's not perfected what they've done. Of course they're perfected, as James just said. They're making money and they're making absolute mint out of it.
Joe, don't you think though the commercial aspect is why Apple are so good? What they've done is they've taken an audience and they've just put it in a chicken den. They've sort of said, right, you buy these Apple Mac products and these Apple iPhones and this and this, you've got the best technology. When actually, for a third of the price, you could probably get better processor speeds, etc.
We've got to remember though, at the end of the day though, Apple in the limelight in a minute. Steve Jobs died, as you said earlier, RIP Steve Jobs. But Steve Jobs dies, Apple in the limelight. The iPhone 4S comes out, they're in the limelight. The iOS 5 update, they're in the limelight. But don't get me wrong, yeah, they're in the spotlight at the minute. But Android, yeah, I've got this ice cream update coming up sort of thing. That's going to take them again that one step further than what the Apple are and the iPhone 4S.
I get what you're saying. I'm just thinking that in terms of you remember earlier on in the film in the O2 store, we obviously said about the look and feel of it being expensive. That's great, but really, you know, they all come from the same country. They're all manufactured, and it doesn't cost a lot to manufacture these products. But the thing is, what Apple have done is they've encapsulated an audience, and the thing is, it's not letting other audiences in. Where we say the heart of the phone is actually in the operating software, what does the future hold for a company like Google and Android and the Android operating system that's got all of this technology behind it that they can now manipulate and turn into their own advantage? You know, Google brought voice recognition companies, etc. Was that in preparation for what they've done with Siri? There's loads of different things that we're sort of speculating, but I firmly believe that with everything that's going on at the moment, you know, Apple take from Samsung, Samsung take from Apple, and that's it's tit for tat.
Yeah, that's fair enough, don't get me wrong, but another big factor that as well, coming back to the Steve Jobs thing, I think at the end of the day, people agree with it, that Steve Jobs was the driving force behind Apple and the Apple products. At the end of the day, iTunes, Jobs, iPhones, iPods, we all look at it now, and he was the driving force and the designing force behind these makes. With him gone now, do you think Apple are going to lose their edge? And then like, they're always going to be catching up to the Androids now?
I get what you're trying to say. I do get it, and I totally agree with you that I think Steve Jobs was a commanding voice behind the brand. But at the same time, it's the people that make the technology. You know, it's the people behind the scenes. Steve Jobs was a great salesperson. That's what he was. And in the exhibitions, the conferences that he did, the introductions, the keynotes, these are all part of the plan. But they're all generated and fueled by a seriously good technology team. But that's not to say that Samsung don't have that technology. And where we're looking at things, let's look at the average users now. You know, people are young, they've got smartphones, they're doing this. What's one of the biggest things?
At the end of the day, you look at these phones, right, and one of the big things they offer, yeah, is Facebook and Twitter. And you look at how many people are on Facebook and Twitter, and how many young people use Facebook and Twitter, and the ability from them, from having to go home, open their laptops, use their computers to go into Facebook and Twitter, they've now got all these features on their phone. And at the end of the day, it's making the age for the Android phone or the iPhone or any sort of phone that offers Facebook and Twitter integration on their phone more usable and accessible.
Right, so let's just get the verdict, because this is what we're here for. This is our verdict, right? Let's look at the score points here. Size. The Galaxy wins by a clear mile. I mean, in terms of size, it's slimmer. Okay, it's wider, but that offers a better display. Samsung have some great TVs, and essentially the technology isn't pigeonholed into one sort of pen. So, in terms of the size, dimensions, obviously the Samsung wins that argument. In terms of the engine behind it, is exactly the same chip. They're in exactly the same sort of, they're made by the same people. Samsung actually made the chips. Graphics, iPhone edges it a little bit because it renders quicker. The operating system though, I firmly believe that Google, I don't know what you think, Joe, I think that Google are going to rapidly catch up and surpass the ISO 5.
Yeah, the manpower and the backing that Google's got and the money behind these days, there's a market there for them, I think, to kill and nail, and I think they're going to do it at some point, and it'll be sooner rather than later. Definitely.
So what are we saying? Are we saying we're going to drink to the Samsung? Cheers.